Hey, what's up? This is Matt Barnes, proud father of four sons, NBA vet, and host of All the Smoke, and I'm coached to win.
Go get me some knowledge.
Here's a couple things I want to get your opinion of this because researching your career, reading articles about you, there's like a bunch of adjectives a lot of writers, former players, some of your opponents use to describe you. Tell me if you agree on any of these. Competitive, fiery,
Yep.
resilient, tenacious, and that's just a few. Do all those pretty much apply to you in your own mind?
Yeah, I mean, if you know me or know anything about my story, I was a football player first. So I really just
Mm-hmm.
transitioned all those attributes of being hard-nosed, tough, physicality, loving contact. Um, And I translated that to the basketball court. I mean, if you watch my career, I was an All-American receiver, number one receiver in the country my senior year, led the nation in touchdowns, was recruited by everyone, but just at the time didn't see anybody 6'8" doing that in the NFL. Guys like Gates and those other guys came, and Jimmy Graham, those guys that transitioned from basketball to hoop or from football to basketball to football came a little bit later. So I picked basketball for the longevity, but again, I just took that mentality of a football player, getting out and wanting ride up, filling a lane and catching a pass from Chris Paul or whoever my point guard was and going up there and finishing. So I just say I was a football player that played, 15 years in the NBA.
I had to like trying to do some research on the whole Matt Barnes ran a 4.340. That is flying. Like at six
Yeah.
seven. What? Well, how much did you weigh at the time?
I was like,
I mean,
I
were
was
you
like,
like a
this is my senior year of high school, so maybe 210, 215. So I was big. I ran a 4.39, so right under a 4.4. But yeah, for my size, there wasn't too many people that, I had a 38-inch vertical, ran a 4.39, like can really catch, can really run routes. So again, football was my first love. My dad had aspirations to play ball and got into the streets, but that's what I really grew up navigating to. I was playing tackle football in the streets in San Jose at 5 years old. You know what I mean? So we were
yeah?
out playing constantly. You know what I mean? So basketball came around. I started like kind of taking a liking to it as I started getting bigger, maybe late in junior high. But football was always, I mean, even to this day, football's still my first love.
Was that pretty much where you got your edge? Would you attribute your edge to your upbringing and your journey to high school, and then your dad's influence on you?
Yeah, I just a chip on my shoulder. Again, I was, a great high school athlete, All-American in two sports, and then I got to UCLA. And we had the number one recruiting class the year before I got there, and my recruiting class was the number one recruiting class. And although I was a top 30 kid in the country, I was kind of on the outside looking in. I wasn't a McDonald's All-American. I wasn't that. So we came with four McDonald's All-Americans in my class. So it was just kind of like, damn, or how do I navigate and find my way? I was a big fish in a small pond in high school, like most kids are. And then I landed in LA and I was a small fish in a big pond. So I really had to kind of find my way and really navigate my experience and try to make the best of it.
So when you do get to UCLA, it's a competitive atmosphere. Every
Yep.
year you're getting the best players. They all want to go to Westwood. Did you try to find something that made you stand out? Did you try to find something that made you special based on all the other talented players that were there?
I just think what made me special is I can play 1 through 5. In high school, I was a 6'8" point guard. Again, I came in with a loaded All-American class, and the class before me had two All-American point guards. So I moved from the wing initially and actually down to the power forward because, again, my versatility allowed me to either play on the perimeter or, be physical enough to play down low. So I just think what made me stand out is you can literally put me at any position on the floor and I would make something happen. And again, we came up in the era where, you had to bide your time, you had to pay your dues. If you didn't play off the bat, you just had to get better. You sat there and watched and learned. You didn't jump in a portal or pout or, try to transfer. You just got better. And that's one thing I will say is every summer we were in the gym working, we got a chance to play against the pros. UCLA has the legendary summer runs with every
Hmm.
pro you can imagine. So, just turned 18 and I'm in the gym with Kobe and Shaq and Paul Pierce and you name it, all these NBA stars. And that's really, I felt like what gave me the confidence to understand, okay, yeah, I got a lot of work to do, but I can definitely play with these guys.
What was that like when you're trying to, hey, I got next, and Paul Pierce is up there, and
Yeah.
Kobe's like, yeah, beat it, kid, no autographs. Like, what was that initial opportunity like?
So it was good for us because individually we probably wouldn't have got on the court, but we always played as our UCLA team. So that was the one thing because
Okay.
we would, we'd go to summer school and then we would come as five or six and we would play as a UCLA unit. And, obviously that's just a bunch of pros that obviously are great, but we always had chemistry. We played with each other. So we would actually have some, a fair amount of success playing in those runs because again, we were playing with our teammates that we play with every day. And all these guys are doing is picking teams and kind of playing pickup basketball. So we definitely we're able to hold our own and really for the most part just learn a ton, being able to guard Paul and Kobe, Ricky Davis, all these guys, Lamont Murray, Tracy Murray, all these guys in an early age. I'm getting, firsthand ass kickings, you know what I mean? Like these guys are busting my ass, but I'm learning each time like the tricks and what I need to do to be able to defend these guys and what I do need to do on the offensive end to kind of pick and find my spot. So that was really where I would say actually playing in the Pac-10 was less. I learned more again in the UCLA summer runs that I actually did playing in the Pac-10 at UCLA.
That is crazy because in football, I can't imagine if I'm 19 years old and I'm living in LA and sure enough, a bunch of pros come in, but they go full pads, right? And they're
Different.
gonna do some 9-on-7, right? And I'd get
Yeah.
crushed. You mentioned UCLA, just it made me think about John Wooden.
Yep.
So if you've ever heard of Crespi Carmelite High School, it's in Encino, California, right off Ventura Boulevard. Got one of the better high school basketball teams. Used to have a really good football team. But there was a little McDonald's like right around the corner by Ralph's, Matt.
Yep.
And every morning when we would do our weight workout, right at like 6 a.m. in the morning, we would all before class we'd walk across Ventura Boulevard and go to the McDonald's right over there, get our hash browns, whatever, cause trouble, whatever the hell we were up to. Sure as hell, every day, John Wooden sitting in a little booth with his powder puff blue socks on, his short shorts, man, like Daisy Duke shorts, drinking his coffee, reading the LA Times, and just we would just
Wow.
sit there and just stare at him. And he never even and it wasn't even a thing for him. It just made me think of that one opportunity because we would hurry up with our workouts so we could see if he was there.
Legend.
That was
I
crazy. Did you ever bump into him? I don't even know if he was
yeah.
alive. I can't remember when he. Did you ever
He was
bump into
still
him? You ever
alive.
see
So
him?
yeah, so yeah, he was there throughout my tenure. Always sat behind our bench and personally talked to him a handful of times. Anytime he would talk to the team, it was always the pyramid of success
Yeah.
and in your 30-year life plan and just the right way to do things, the right way to tie your shoes, the right way to tuck it. He was just such a man
That's what I
of
was gonna say.
pri-
Yeah.
principle and discipline and just old school of just doing things the right way. Again, I think as you mentioned, we're going to talk about my sons in their era. It was just a different time. We came up in a different time where discipline kind of led, the way we moved in sports and in life and school. Like discipline was okay, but now you discipline or you yell or you talk to kids the wrong way and they run, they transfer, they jump in the portal, they close off. So, what I've been finding very interesting, obviously being able to coach my kids is understanding how to relate and get through to this newer generation because they didn't come up like us. We would get cussed out and take the cuss out and be better next time. Like they get cussed out now and we might not see the kid again. You know what I mean? So it's just a different time as far as and I bring it back to just the John Wooden philosophies of principle and discipline and just the way you're supposed to routinely do things. So that's really interesting me as a former athlete now and a father trying to really understand what this next generation is about it and really most important how to get through to that next generation.
I was gonna wait, but since you brought it up, I do think it's interesting. First, as far as so you coach your son's AAU team, your two sons, two twin boys, Isaiah and Carter, both sophomores currently at Crespi Carmelite High School.
Yep.
Very good players, both guards. One's more of a shooting guard. What is Carter more the point guard, and Isaiah more the? How does it work? Are they,
They're really
or did people just kind of determine who they were?
they have different games, but they do a little bit of everything. That's one thing again that I installed in them is being able to play all positions on the floor and really understanding the game. Like we don't play the game, we think the game. And I think too often now kids are just out there playing. It's this generation of basketball players are probably more skilled than ever, but I feel like they lack the IQ of the game because now, like when we were growing up, like we played outside and we played every sport under the sun. Now it's very sport specific and it's year-round training and it's year-round playing. So the kids don't get, I felt like football, baseball, and track added to my basketball repertoire. But now kids are just around the clock playing. So I feel like, these kids train and they train one on one with their trainers. They put their head down, they dribble the ball between their legs 18 times and do a spin move and all this kind of other shit. And it's just like, yeah, that's great, but that's why you see the influx of European players that understand how to play with spacing and understand how to play how to pick and roll and cuts and back doors and all this kind of thing. So one thing again that we emphasize in the summertime, and I think it's great too, because obviously, their coach in high school is their stepdad, Derek Fisher. So someone who's had a long run in the NBA and really understands the game. So really with the twins, the main thing I preach is mental toughness and thinking the game, not just playing the game.
I had to write that one down because playing the game and thinking the game. Do the boys ever wanted to play another sport? Lacrosse, football, track?
Now they are, unfortunately, but growing up, they played baseball and football literally up until the pandemic, and then the league that they were playing football in never came back. So they kind of lost the desire and focused solely on basketball, which not to say that I was against, but I wish that they would have given other sports a chance. I even tried to get them to go out and play football last year and this year at Crespi, just to give their body a break from the normal basketball wear and tear, train new muscles and develop new skill sets again. Because I feel like playing different things helps for your main thing. But now it's really a catch-22 because if you do play another sport, you kind of get behind the eight ball in your main sport because kids again are year-round. It's almost a job now for kids. Like they play baseball, they play basketball, or football, and those we never had year-round sports. We always went to whatever season it was. We were in that season, we would play that sport. And now, particular sports go year-round. So it's just really hard to get kids to do multiple sports and multiple things at once.
I'm curious about this because tough childhood, tough kid, one of two or three black kids at your high school, Del Campo High School in Sacramento. You were hardened not by choice, but by circumstance. This is how you turned out, and this is who you are. I'm curious because a lot of pro athletes, when they're established, they play a long time, they have a nice little nest egg. How do you create and promote that mentality into your kids that have a completely different
Yeah.
upbringing than you?
First and foremost, I'm proud that I worked my butt off so my kids didn't have to grow up the way I did on food stamps and living with
Sure.
family
Yeah.
members and drugs and violence and all that stuff. And it's weird because I feel like sometimes people try to hold that against the kids. Like that's what we were supposed to do as parents. We were supposed to make their lives better than ours. And I feel like I definitely succeeded that. But to your point, always talking to them at an early age. Their mom and I split up when they were 5, but we were both really on the same page, always raising grounded, humble kids. So, they would always get a taste of real basketball, when we put them in these YMCA leagues or the leagues they played in early on, because at most of the time they went to school with a bunch of white kids. And it's no knock on white kids, but it's just like it was
Mhm.
definitely a different environment when we put them into the basketball program. So that's where they kind of got to see that, okay, not everybody lives like this. The world isn't really what it is in our bubble. And we've always been really good with giving back, because, with twins, there's just a bunch of shit. So it's a bunch of shoes, a bunch of clothes, a bunch of toys.
Mhm.
So at a very early age, we would always, okay, hey, if you don't like this toy anymore, or this doesn't fit anymore, let's put it in the recycle box so we can go donate that to some underprivileged kids. So we just at an early age, we just really made them kind of give back and understand there's much more. I mean, although we're not filthy crazy rich, we were able to do well for ourselves and we live behind gates and they go to private schools. So being able to keep them humbled and understand that, we're in a blessed situation, but the rest of the world isn't, always on that page. So that and then kind of that dog mentality, everything you mentioned earlier in that interview is what kind of guided me through 15 years in the NBA of kind of having that chip in my upbringing and what I saw in the hard knocks. And thankfully, they really haven't had no hard knocks. So how do I instill that toughness and discipline into them? And I think one, they were old enough to see me play my last 4 or 5 years, and they saw what kind of player, hard-nosed dog I was, and I had them around the team a lot. So again, as I mentioned early on, that mental approach that has always been very big for me with them, because again, not only am I teaching them the approach to play in basketball, but that same approach in life and understanding what this world is about. Because at the end of the day, I mean, obviously we want successful athletes, but we want successful human beings first and foremost.
I tell you what my dad did. He took us to the Venice courts one summer, and he basically said, "Just go," and then he left us to
And
there
for
just to
yourself.
play.
And for yourself,
Yeah,
yeah. I
he's
mean,
not.
we used to
Yeah,
play it. We played at parks. We grew up playing football at parks, playing basketball at parks. Like kids aren't really outside like that no more. But that's how we learn. Our first fights were outside in the neighborhood or at the park, and our first kiss was at, in the same situations. But again, these days, kids don't play outside. One, because the world's changed, there's a lot of weirdos, but technology has really taken over these kids' minds. So you
yeah.
have to get your ass out of the house and go do something. You know what I mean? Like you have to almost push them. But you remember when you and I were growing up, we couldn't wait to get outside the house, and they had to call us to come back in the house. Like now we can't
Yeah,
get these
street
kids out of the
lights. Yeah,
house. Right.
yeah,
The rules. Yeah, the
yeah.
rules.
I love talking about coaching and developing players and kids. Do you have a coach that made a difference in your life? Is there a guy maybe when you were younger, Pop Warner,
Yeah.
high school football, you played forever and you played for a bunch of different pro teams? Man,
Yeah.
you played in the G League when it was called the D League. So I mean, it's been a
Nasty.
long time.
Nasty. Yeah. Guys that stood out. Coach Kenyon, my football coach in high school, someone to this day I still talk to. Just great. Stayed on my ass. I got pulled up to varsity my sophomore year, and although I knew I was good enough to play, he made me sit there and watch and learn. And it would be times where the quarterback would come grab me and come on, coach, put him in. He's just like, nope, sit here and watch. So I kind of had just had to kind of sit there and understand. And at the time, I didn't know what he was doing, but he was just teaching me, a lesson to just, hey, wait your turn and stay ready. So he was someone that had made a big impact in my life. And then another guy, Gus Armstead, who's you actually know his son. His son is Eric Armstead. Used to play for the 49ers. Now he's with the
Mm,
Jaguars.
hmm.
So I actually grew up
Yeah.
with Eric Armstead. He was a little chubby kid that used to rebound for me, before he stretched out and became the big defensive lineman monster that he is today. But his
Yeah.
dad was very instrumental in just working with me and giving me a place to play and opening up the gym and kind of just being there whenever I needed. So I would probably say those two coaches, as I was growing up, stood out the most, and to this day are still great friends of mine.
Derek Fisher coaches the varsity team at Crespi High School.
Yep.
You coach your son's AAU team, right? So, what is your approach? What's game time like for Matt Barnes before he addresses the team?
Again, teaching concepts. I think AU is a mess right now, and that's a whole nother conversation, but just trying to prepare these kids the best way we possibly can for the next level. Obviously the goal is to win games when you're playing AU, but at the same time, we want to, make them better players and better young men and really kind of trying to break bad habits because again, the way of training and the way things go, kids are going about it is not necessarily the right way. And I feel like that's why so many kids get washed out. So we try to teach kids like, hey, this is not going to work. This may work on your high school team because you're the man, but this next level, you're going to go into a big pool and everybody is the man. So how do you stand out? How do you play when you're playing with other, great players? So we're constantly trying to teach concepts and spacing and just really understanding the game. We give our teams, we run pro sets and we have pro spacing and we stress cutting, we stress screening and spacing. So we really, myself and then another coach, one of my good friends, I went to UCLA with Ryan Bailey. He's been the head coach at Brentwood for 10 or 15 years now. He's one of the best coaches in LA. So again, we really try to do a lot of teaching because I feel like that's what's missing. I feel like this A system is, if we're lucky, we get to practice once a week and then we'll play 5 or 6 games on the weekend. And I don't feel like you get better that way. I feel like you get better by working during the week. I would prefer to have 3 or 4 practices and maybe play 1 or 2 games on the weekend and see all the hard work from practice translate into the game. But unfortunately, now it's just a ton of games. And again, that's talking to the AU system because it's just a money maker now for these people throwing everything. So it's less about teaching and it's just more about how many games can we get in so we can charge these kids and their parents as much money as we possibly can. So that's how we try to stand out. That's how we try to prepare. We watch a lot of film with our kids and we just try to teach them the right way because, Moose and I both played at UCLA and then I was able to take it to the next level. So just really trying to give a kids the blueprint to, I can give you the blueprint, but you have to apply it to your life. And a lot of kids listen and that's why I'm in it.
Man, I don't even want to go down the AAU road because I hate AAU. I despise
Yeah.
it. What I hate as a parent is I pay all this money for my son to play on this team, and then I go to the tournaments and then they charged me $30 to get into the tournament. And I was like, I
30
thought I
bucks to
just
park.
paid to get into the
What
tournament.
about what about
Oh,
don't forget the 20 or
golly.
$30 to park, and it's a whole scam, man. It's just it's a
I hate it.
money-making tool now, and it's again, it's less about development and it's more about how many games, how many tournaments, and how much money can we charge these parents?
But what's the alternative then, Matt? Like
Nothing.
if the I mean it's that
There's
it's
nothing
I guess like
else.
if you decide for parents out there that are in AAU and there's millions of them, I guess if you tell me if I'm wrong, right? Like if you decide to be in that world, you just have to suck it up and deal with all the crap that goes with it. I'm assuming that's the
It is
only way
what
to
it
deal with it.
is. It's you know what's
Yeah, it
funny is
is what it is.
we were having this conversation last night. I went to this dinner with this new company that works with retired NFL players. They're called PAC. They work with retired NFL players, and they're starting to get into the NFL space, or excuse me, the NBA space, starting in the NFL
Yeah.
space. And we were talking about AU, and is it fixable? How can it be fixed? And I was just saying to them, like, I feel like now more than ever, if it was going to be fixed, I think it could be on the dads because there's so many NBA dads that have kids playing now, and you see dads at the tournaments as coaches, supporters, coaching in coaching in college. So there's so many there's always been the narrative of the absentee black dad for athletes and whatever, and I think that's been dispelled, and it's a myth now, but there's so when I tell you we just got back from Memphis on Sunday night, and I probably saw 20 guys that I either played against or wrote, from Akeem
Hmm.
Olajuwon to Chris Paul to Ja Morant to Bonzi Wells to Jermaine O'Neal. There was just so many of us out there. I feel like if there's someone, and maybe it may be me, to just rally us up and go sit down with Nike and be like, hey, we need to change this AAU system because again, I think trying to start it on our own it would be too much of an uphill battle. But if we were to, jump on board with a Nike and implement a new system that prioritize teaching and education of the game and less games, I really think that we could really change the landscape in AAU moving forward. But that's a heavy lift and obviously a lofty idea. So we'll see if I ever
Yeah.
get around to putting that group together.
Your ally would probably be the coaches. Like I bet college coaches are just jonesing for just less games to go to, right? So they could have some sort of summer themselves. And maybe it's one of those, blue blood coaches that has a lot of power and just forces everybody else to do it at the same time. Who the hell
Yep.
knows? So let's say Isaiah has a bad game. Do you have any, or Carter, either one? Do you have any rules as far as how they deal with the bad game? Like, how do you address like the failure that undoubtedly will show up in their game at some point in time?
We don't have any rules or regulations on it. If they want to talk about it, we can talk about it. If they don't, we don't. You know what I mean? Like it's not like, hey, we're gonna sit down and address this. I'm very, again, open with my kids. Whether they play good or bad, I'm always, one question I always ask them is, what do you feel like you could have did better to help yourself and help the team today? And I'll listen to that answer. And if it's a real answer, we can explore. If it's a shorthanded answer, I can tell they don't want to talk, and I'll leave it alone. So again,
Yeah.
and that's one thing as a pro athlete, we've been through all the coaching and all the tricks and all the tactics. And I feel like what I see at this level is some parents are trying to vicariously live through their kids, and they put too much pressure on the kids and make it a job too early. Like I feel like the twins finally fell in love with the game. They're 16 now. I think they fell in love with the game at about 13 or 14. But because before, hey, let's go work out. Nah, I don't want to, dad. Or hey, let's go. Nah. And they finally got to a point at about 13, 14, like, hey, dad, can we go work out? Or dad, can we get a trainer now? So it was always kind of like on their time because again, I can't love it more than them. Like I had a
Mhm.
great career and I had a blast and they got to see that and experience and reap the benefits. But at the end of the day, I feel like the kid has to love this sport or whatever sport they want to play. So I feel like they kind of fell in love with it maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and it's been great because then I put them in place with different trainers and being able to have them hear different voices and really get to it. So, there's no rhyme or reason. Bad games happen often, and you know what is funny is Isaiah and Carter are really different when it comes to handling pressure or handling failure or even handling success. I feel like Isaiah is someone who's really mentally strong that no matter what, he's going to be him. Carter is someone that's a little more on a roller coaster. He lives and die with or he was. This is something we've been working on. That's kind of
Mhm.
our secret every summer. I'm on his ass because he's really, I tell him, no one should be able to look at your face and tell whether you're playing a good or a bad game. You should be even keeled. You can't get too high for the highs. You can't get too low for the lows because it's always the next play. So during the summer, when I'm training them or even with them with their other trainers and I'm there, any kind of 10 push-ups just on the spot. I don't want to hear shit. Just 10 push-ups because again, you have to, what these college coaches are looking at, they're looking at body language. How do you handle success? How do you handle failure? How do you support your team when you're on the bench? So again, having a father that's been there and done that and knowing what these recruiters and these scouts are looking at each level, I'm just trying to prepare them because I'm not always going to be by their side to be able to be, hey, pick your chin up or hey, straighten up because people. So I'm trying to do my best when I do have them to just make them understand that eyes are always going to be on you and you got to carry yourself at a certain level if you expect to make it to a certain level. So again, my whole thing with my kids is yes, training is important and weightlifting is important, but it's when you get to that 1%, when you get to, if you're lucky enough to get to the league, that shit is 90% mental. And what separates the mentality that will separate from the talent. You see more people with strong will than I've seen a ton of guys, and I'm sure when you play to a ton of guys that were super
Hmm.
talented, but they didn't have nothing up here, and they came and went. I was able to last. I wasn't the most talented, but I had a lot of heart, and I was a really high IQ and mentally strong player. And I think that is very important, especially these days, because there's just so many distractions and there's so many alternate roads and pick up and leave and jump in the portal and do all this other stuff. So again, I want to raise mentally strong men that become mentally strong athletes.
I love the fact that, okay, so the kids came to you and said, because I
Yep.
deal with that now. I deal with that now. And I'm just like, man, I tell my wife, like, man, she doesn't want to go shoot. Like, my dad was never able to go shoot with me. And if he
Not
did ask
once.
me to go shoot, I was like, yes. And then he would be like, all right, I got to go back inside. I was like, damn, that was only 10 minutes.
Right,
I'm
right.
sitting here playing games
Yeah,
by myself.
yeah, yeah.
So, okay, so the other aspect of this that I think is interesting is you probably do some of the things I think most parents wish they had the balls to do. I say this with the most respect imaginable, especially as a former athlete, your kids are targeted. They got the name on the back, so people are taking shots at them. People are
Yep.
like being a little bit rougher on them. They're ganging up on them. They're verbally abusing them. The parents. I've sat next to some parents, and they said that some of the nastiest stuff I ever heard of in my life, and they had no idea I was sitting right next to them. And I swear I wanted to grab them
Crazy.
by their, just grab
Yep.
them and just shake them because it takes a lot of discipline for me. I'm just not going to lie. I've only had a couple instances where I've kind of lost my shit, Matt. And one was at an AAU tournament in Kentucky, Run for the Roses. I think a lot of people go to. Lost my shit, and it was a nightmare. But how difficult it is it there for you to just try to bite your tongue and just kind of just ignore the noise and then tell your kids to do the same thing?
I'm more on them to be able to do it and bite their tongue and allow me to be the bad guy. If I have to cuss a parent out, if I have to cuss the ref out, let me be the bad guy. I'm good at it. I've done it for a long time on a very high level. So I always stress to them, do as I say, don't do as I do. You know what I mean? Because again, I tell our whole team, like, don't worry about the refs. I'm going to be on the refs the
Yeah.
entire game. And then again, obviously having that last name, we have a lot of athletes, pro athletes that are in the Valley now. The Valley, when you played, it was more of, I know at least in basketball, the city schools were the better basketball schools. Now
Hmm.
all the
Yeah.
talent is in the Valley. The Valley, arguably, the Mission League is arguably one of the best basketball leagues in the entire country. So there is a lot of pressure being an athlete's son, and there's perks and there's pros and cons to it. Some people are going to love you for being my son. Some people are going to hate you off the rip, and they don't even know who you are because you're my son. And same thing with the refs. Some of these refs are really cool and personable and call a good game, or some of these refs are assholes because of me. You know what I mean? So it's really that fine line. But one thing, not only do I stress to my kids, but I stress to our team and our parents, let me be the bad guy. Let me do the yelling. Let me do the cussing. You guys just worry about playing basketball. So I try to be that shield, and I think the Twins have done a great job. I mean, it started early on when I first started coaching them, at 8 or 9 years old. Hearing parents yell nasty things, I'm just like, these kids are in third grade. Like, say that again, I'm gonna knock your fucking
I
face off.
know,
You
right?
know what I mean? So it's just
Oh
like
my God, I
some
know.
parents, some parents are just there. There's no filters. But again, I was like, hey,
Yeah.
block that out. Try to block that out the best you can. Don't worry about it. Just know daddy's got your back and I'm gonna handle, all the noise. So they've been good. Again, they were my kids. So, there'd be times where I'd get kicked out of games and I'd grab them out of the crowd and let them come in the locker room with me and I'd drink a beer while they're hanging out playing in the locker room. They just kind of know what daddy was and what daddy was about, how much daddy's teammates loved him. People hated playing against me and loved to have me, how Kobe recruited me. And from the jump, he was Uncle Kobe from the time the boys were 4 years old, giving them a pair of shoes, literally up until the day he died. And now still to this day, Vanessa sends them every Kobe drop. They were around Chris Paul and Blake Griffin. They were around Steph Curry and Kevin Durant. So they just got to be around the game and saw how I moved. I never, I was a role player and I was very comfortable being a role player. I was always really good with the stars because they loved my mentality and the way I moved. So they just saw the way daddy moved, and if the team is in
Yeah.
it, daddy's in it. You know what I mean? So again, I think some of them just naturally rubbed off on them and they got tough skin early on. I remember one particular time when they were traveling, um, and this was after the ball fake and with Kobe. And we became teammates, but I remember a couple trips that season, and then later when I played on the Clippers, the twins would come to the games, and Carter was like, "Daddy, how come every time they announce you in the starting lineup, people boo?" I'm just like, "Damn, how do I explain? Like, how do I explain that to them?" And at
Uh,
the time, they really loved wrestling, so I'm just like, Daddy's job every night is to guard the best players in the world. So Kevin Durant, LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, Paul Pierce, Kobe, you name it. So those guys are like Hulk Hogan, and Daddy is the Undertaker. So my job is to come be the bad guy and play defense and be me. And they're like, "Oh, so are you really a bad guy?" I'm like, "No, I'm not really a bad guy, but I just kind of have to play one because people don't like the way I play defense and how hard I play defense on the best player." So that was kind of just off the top of my head, the fastest way to explain it to them. And they kind of got that. So they just kind of embraced it like, "Oh, you're only booing my daddy because he's doing a good job." You know what I mean? So that was something that I was able to implement in them early. And I think it kind of just grew with them and kind of made them understand like, I've had whole arenas, "Fuck you, Barnes," or "Boom," you know what I mean? And like to me, I thrive in that. I absolutely
yeah.
love it because that means if I wasn't doing nothing, they wouldn't be saying nothing. I have to be
Yeah.
doing something to have everyone, on edge at me. So I thrive in environments like that. And again, that's probably my upbringing and the chip on my shoulder. So again, to your earlier question, how do I implement that in my kids? And I think it's a lot of it was just being able to observe it themselves.
I saw this great quote you had about your boys where you said, quote, half of my why. I thought that was really deep, right? As I've read, like, I only have my one son. I got four girls.
Ooh,
So that was, yeah, I know, dude. I'm telling you.
man.
Listen, they're different to coach now. They're just as freaking tough
Oh, I
as
think I
anybody.
think women are more physical than men. Like there's a more physicality on the women's side than there is, I feel like, on the men's side sometimes.
I wanted to say a couple more things because and I think I probably already know this answer. Okay. Because I ask this to every guest that comes on the show, and I've never gotten the same answer once. If you could gift one trait, one characteristic to young adults, young athletes today, a trait that you think would help them best succeed, not only in life, but a sport that they're playing in, what would that one trait or one characteristic be?
Mental toughness, without a doubt. And I feel like now more than ever, when we were growing up, it was less noise. We got to be ourselves. We didn't know who was who until we played them. There wasn't the internet. Like we went out there and played. Now agents are, courting freshmen in high school and kids are getting money and kids are transferring and there's just so much outside noise on top of all the internet noise. You can lose by 30. Next thing you know, the team that lost by 30, a kid will have a highlight tape up. So it's so ass backwards now that I feel like if you have any kind of chance to succeed, particularly in sports, but just overall in life, mental toughness is at the top of the list. And something to this day at 45 that I'm still trying to learn is being able to control your emotions. You can't give other people the power of being able to push your buttons. And that's something to this day that I'm still trying to learn. So as I'm trying to learn, that's definitely something that I'm trying to implement in my sons and the teams I coach as well.
Go get me some knowledge.